Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. We are here at NFPA and we have kind of a big announcement coming from the podcast. Not sold, but a partnership with NFSA where we're going to be doing airing episodes that have been recorded not only by myself, but various members of NFSA's Future Leadership Committee. I've got Caleb here from NFSA. Caleb, what do you think?
Gosh, it's great to be with you, Chris.
Awesome.
And we're really excited about the using the podcast as a venue to share some of these interviews that we've done.
So you guys have already pre-recorded about 10 episodes of various kind of heavy hitters of the sprinkler industry.
Yes.
And I'm super excited for the opportunity to kind of get the conversations and these stories of people from the industry, get the stories out there.
Yeah, so the Future Leadership Committee of NFSA was formed, probably about a decade ago.
Yep.
And the board recognized the need to sort of bring up the next generation. And there's a lot of talk about that. So they put some action together, funded it, to bring folks of our generation to the board meetings,
right,
to learn how the governance of an association works and more about the industry. And so that's been going on for about 10 years. Daniel Wake, who's the past chair of that committee, and I were speaking, because I serve as the staff liaison there, about what projects could the FLC take on that would be unique to that group. And through conversations, we kind of settled on what if we created an intentional opportunity for future leaders to interview what I would say legends and leaders, which is what the series is called.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that looks like either what we would call legends in the industry, names that if I throw them out, people would recognize, or current leaders in the industry, leaders of companies, contracting, engineering firms, manufacturers. And some folks we're at that special time in the industry where you have there are legends still serving as leaders.
Absolutely, many legends still serving.
There are, and so it's kind of started with that, but I'll just use Daniel Wake as an example, right? It's not often that Daniel would have an intentional time to get to sit down with Larry Thao, and you get to interview him and ask him more about questions beyond just group couplings and the work type stuff, but really work-life balance and character. And there's a lot of really good insight from these folks that you wouldn't normally have conversation about over bar top stuff.
Yeah, the behind-the-scenes conversations that happen every day with them, we're going to bring those opportunities and conversations out.
You're going to get to see Kevin P. Jr. interview his dad, right?
That's right, yep.
And it's just super fun interviews. Terry Victor's on there.
Yep.
James Gunnells, names that you would recognize. Steve Ulmer.
Yep.
I think is the first one we're going to launch.
Yep.
He was the Golden Sprinkler Award winner for NFSA.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
So we did the podcast. Yeah, I think we recorded it a year and a half ago.
Yep.
And we've put a number of them on YouTube, and we're really looking for again, thinking about how do you connect with future leaders right now, and we go, how do you consume content? I think we both listen to podcasts. I spend a lot of time in the car. I've got my list dialed up. I'm happy with the truck. It's not the radio. I'm not just flipping dials.
That's right.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. And so we had talked about, what if we launched our own podcast?
Yep.
And then the conversation just evolved to, what if we just worked with Chris, put this content out already on a platform that exists and is respected, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Maybe we'll do some other episodes, and who knows?
We'll keep firing down the pike. Stay tuned. The first episode actually is going to be coming out after this. This is the intro. Caleb, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Like and subscribe.
Talk about how you got started in the industry. What was your first job in the sprinkler industry? How did you get your introduction into it?
Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
So, to work my way into that answer, my grandfather started in the sprinkler business in 1912. So this is our family's 110th year in the business. And Dad turned 16 and Dad went into the business. I turned 16, I went into the business. I took driver education in high school so I could drive at night at 17. And after I finished school, I went and picked my grandfather up. He wasn't too good of a driver at that point in time in his life. And I would drive him down to the office, and I did odd jobs. I made blueprints. I went and held the dumb end of a tape out on job sites when we were surveying. I ran errands. I delivered materials from the shop and did oddball jobs like that. I was paid $2 an hour, and minimum wage was $1.60. So I was raking it in.
Nice. So at some point, I guess you started as an apprentice, or did you go into design? What did you do after?
So I graduated high school, and I worked in the shop, in the office a little bit, mostly in the shop, kind of learning from the bottom up. That was the track that Dad wanted me to do. He wanted me to learn all aspects of the business. So I spent a few months. You had to be 18 before you could actually be an apprentice. And Buffalo had its own local at the time, and apprenticeship applications were closed. So I applied a month early to 669, which our Rochester and Syracuse, New York offices were affiliated with. They accepted me 2 weeks short of my 18th birthday, so I actually started my apprenticeship as a 17-year-old. Just before I finished my 4th year, they changed the apprenticeship rules that if you had completed your Penn State lessons, you could transition to journeyman in 4 years. So I actually spent the first couple weeks as a journeyman as a 21-year-old and didn't have any idea what I was doing. 4 years was the wrong number of years. It definitely needs to be 5, but that started my journey.
So how long before you moved into a management role?
I spent about 8 years in the field, which was great time spent. And I didn't really understand at that point in time how that was setting me up for success, because so much of what's done in the office revolves around the fact that you need to know what's going on in the field, particularly how productive your crew can be in a variety of different situations. So it was, I think I was 26 years old, 27 years old when I started transitioning a little bit into the office. We had somebody that was going to retire, and I wanted to learn the estimating side of it. And I just took off from there. It seemed like a natural fit. I was comfortable in that setting, meeting people and putting the pricing together. And again, using my experience of having time in the field, I felt comfortable with my estimates, that I knew how long it was going to take for somebody to do a particular task and job.
So it sounds like you feel like your time in the field really helped you be successful. Could you elaborate a little more on that?
Sure. I think even today when I walk out on a job site, and I try to do that frequently, because I think it's important that the men in the field understand that you care about them equally and how important they are to your business.
Sure. Let's see. I guess we'll do the sort of basic one. How do you define success in a general sense?
So I think success comes as a team. That's kind of the spirit that I try to run our business. So it's great if somebody has success and somebody else doesn't have success. I'm going to pause there.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. I think team success is really the way success should be measured. Some people are going to be successful, but if all your teammates aren't feeling that rising tide, there's still an element that's not successful. So bringing everybody along, that rising tide lifts all boats. I want everybody to grow with the business and experience success. That's how I think you consistently keep your business in good shape, keep it profitable. Having people retire with your business should be the goal, in my estimation. And if they have a good work ethic, then we're going to be able to teach them the trade. If they come in and they're sloppy and they're lazy and they show up late and they don't care, there's probably another job somewhere out in the world for them. It's just not with us at that particular time.
What do you hope will be remembered as your greatest contribution to the fire sprinkler industry?
I think the way I go about my business, I care about everybody. I'm at a point in life when nobody understands why I'm still working. And I'm still working because I love the industry and I want to give back. This is my 50th year in the business. And I have so much to offer, and there's so many young people that they want to listen to my stories. I give them alternative ways to look at things. I'm optimistic by nature, but I want to challenge them. I want to challenge them to take some chances, weigh their odds, right? You don't want to be risking the whole business for a job you shouldn't have, you shouldn't try to take that opportunity on. It's too much for the company. It's one of the things that I school people on is don't get ahead of yourself. Take it one step at a time. You can't go from 0 to 100. So I think that, my legacy is I'm a guy that wants to give back more than I got in the business.
Think back on an obstacle or a challenge that you had to overcome that you think helped shape your career or your outlook. Maybe talk about what it was and what you learned from it, what you took away from it.
Well, the one that jumps in my mind, and it might seem insignificant, but to me it was important. We had a call to a long-standing customer that they had an underground break. And you really don't know what's 6 feet underground until you dig it up. One of our most experienced fitters was out there. We dug it up, we found it, we repaired the piece that we saw, and we turned the water back on, and water was continuing to leak. There was additional leakage that was not uncovered, in our dig. Well, the customer went ballistic. Get your equipment off the site, this and that. He just read me the riot act, and he was basically going to fire us from the job, when my perception was there's no way. That's why we turned the water on slowly to see if the leak has stopped. So I got in a truck, I drove out there, and I told him that I wasn't even going to charge him for the job. I was so mad that he, kind of was blaming us for a situation that had nothing to do with us, but our reputation was so important. I didn't want one person saying something bad about us, that we failed on a job or we didn't do it the right way. And I got a lot of accolades from my crew and stuff for going out there and addressing it with this guy. And to this day, that customer is still a customer of ours.
Wow. So think about someone or maybe more than one person who you feel like had the greatest impact on your career or your the development of the traits you needed to be successful. Maybe talk about that person.
So it would have to be my dad. He's the one that gave me the opportunity, but it started a little bit before. When you're born into a sprinkler family and you go spend a night at your grandparents' house, and you see your grandfather at the drawing board, go say goodnight to him when you're a little kid, and he's sitting there and he's drafting, and you're curious, and he's laying out a sprinkler system. And when you're 10 years old, the phone rings at 2 o'clock in the morning and your dad wakes you up and says, hey, do you want to go on the emergency call? And I would go on job sites, and I'd be walking around, the firemen were there and lights and stuff, and then I could go to school late. The next day. It was a good influence on me to give me the drive to want to make this business part of my life. Dad also recognized, I think, the right way to train me. Spending a little time in the office, spending some time in the fabrication shop, being in the field, learning the business that way, bringing me back in the business, letting me experience purchasing, running manpower, learning design a bit, learning the sales side, learning the business, the accounting and the financial side, learning the insurance and what happens if you have a claim and how to run all that stuff. There's so many facets of the business, and he didn't miss a step in my development, and it was a slow development, and that was purposeful. I got a chance to kind of almost graduate each segment, if you will, so that I had the foundational knowledge. So he knew it wasn't if some of this stuff was going to happen to me, if it wasn't that, you might never run into rough waters. It was when you do, he's going to prepare me as best he could for that. And that credit all goes to Dad.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that. I have a good friend whose family runs a trucking company, and when he graduated from college, his dad said, if you're going to take over this company, you're going to know everything about it. And he made him spend a year driving an 18-wheeler before he started in the office, and then he started one notch above the secretary. And,
Yeah.
I've heard so many people say that you can't run a successful business without knowing every aspect of it. So that's very interesting.
So if a job isn't going well in particular, I'm going to maybe spend a little bit more time out there. I'm going to visit it more regularly. And these guys know that I know what I'm talking about when it comes time for them to explain to me why they're not as productive. So they can't pull the wool over my eyes. I can get out there, and I believe I can influence them in a positive way and get the productivity up and try to save the job or get the labor hours back on track.
I've read a lot about successful sports coaches, and one of the things that they all come back to is learning when to be hard on players and when to pat them on the back and tell them it's okay. What has your experience been with that, and how have you learned to manage those two sides, the carrot and the stick, sort of?
Well, it's interesting that you started with the coach analysis, because I coached my daughter's travel softball team, and I read a book about how female athletes needed to be treated different than male athletes. But it comes down to basically the same principles. Some of them need the arm around the shoulder. Some of them need a kick in the butt. And then there's everything in between. And as a good coach or a good leader, you need to be able to recognize the trait in your employee and know which one of those is going to work. I'm not a yeller and screamer primarily. I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. That never motivated me if someone exploded on me and tried to tear my head off. So I think naturally I'm a product of how I feel. So I try to treat people the way I felt comfortable being treated, and I think I've over the years I've produced results, and having a good nature with them, explaining the situation, not berating them for it. Most of the time, the people know that they've made a mistake. They're already beating themselves up. You don't need to pile on. You get a penalty in football for piling on, and I try not to do that. Also, if they get it, they get it, and maybe I'll give them a little different perspective.
So this will kind of backtrack a little bit, but I know this is one of the questions that we sort of made a montage out of. So, and you can take a second to think about this. This is sort of off the record, but just know that we're going to cut this up to use the best stuff and to make you look as good as possible. We're not going to show this in long form, obviously, with me doing this monologue right now. So, take a minute and think about some of the best advice you've gotten, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Some of the best advice I've gotten would include if you're supposed to start at 8 o'clock and you show up at 8 o'clock, you're late. 7:45 is the time. Don't leave the job early. Don't make excuses that, I didn't work my lunch hour and stuff like that. You can get away with that once in a while if you need to, but, do your job. When you transition from the field to the office, and a lot of people are aware of this, you find out that the perception of the office when you're in the field is they have the gravy job. Well, it's not the gravy job. There's not a lot of field guys work until 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and Saturdays and Sundays, unless they're getting paid time and a half or double time for it. But when you're in the office, you got to put in the hours to get the job done, and that's satisfying, if you're into it.
Is there anything you wish someone had told you that they didn't? You realize now it would have been helpful?
I think that the way our company was run, the way a lot of family businesses are run, even today, is we didn't take the financial side as seriously as we should have. We didn't really understand what makes up the performance side of the business. If we had enough cash on hand, we felt pretty good about that, keeping the doors open. We didn't tie the rest of the stuff together.
Put a sign up or
Yeah,
something.
I know. So that financial part of it, I wish I would have had a better understanding, where I spent 8 years in the field and I did design and I did all the other stuff. The spot we skipped out on was the financial side. That was kind of a trial and error, learning to do work in process adjustments and do them accurately. Do them so that they're truthful, not kicking the can down the road in hopes that the job would turn it around. You have to be, realistic on that. How to, run your cash flow, how to manage your collections. We were sloppy on collections. Well, they'll pay us someday, so we would just let them go. And, you need cash flow. You got to get the money in the door. So the financial lesson would be the spot that I wish I would have had more of an education. I wish I could have had 6 months or a year of financial education where I rode shotgun with our controller, our bookkeeper, and learned better lessons.
It's okay if this is your definition too, but I've heard it said many times that character is what you do, how you act when no one is watching. Would you agree with that, or is there some other definition that you subscribe to?
No, I think your definition, I've heard that before, but for me, character is about being honest, and it's way easier to be honest and to tell the truth than it is to try to do half-truths or fabricate a lie or something like that. If you're telling the truth, you only have to remember the truth. If you're twisting something, you got to remember how you twisted it so it's consistent. And it's way easier just to tell the truth. I think that gives you a reputation of being ethical and having good character, and that fosters a nice culture. You want the culture that your employees are honest. If you're dishonest or you're misleading them, why should you not expect that they might, some pick up that habit and be the same way back at you?
Sure. So you've talked a lot about your, excuse me, your father and your grandfather. Besides maybe your parents or your grandparents, who do you think helped instill that sense of importance and being honest and what that means about your character?
Through my career, I had a chance to work alongside some great people. I mentioned earlier that I couldn't get in the Buffalo local, so I had to go on the road, and I stayed in Syracuse. One of my best friends also became an apprentice the same time I did, and we worked together, and his father ran our Syracuse office. And the influences of the people that worked with my dad were just as important. Sometimes, I talked about how important my dad was to me, but there's sometimes you conflict with a parent. I could teach, every girl on the softball team would listen to me except my own daughter. So we had another parent talk to her, and it was the same for me with, their child. It was the same way at work. There were some things I just couldn't get through, or, Dad was frustrated with me, but I could go to, our design manager, I could go to the Syracuse branch manager, and I always felt like they had my best interest in mind. Even Marshall Davis, who was the Davis and Davis Ulmer, took me under his wing. I remember one lesson he gave me. I was doing sales, and I called him up, call in our price for a job, and I told him our price was $85,000. And he said, "Can you do it for 80?" And I said, "Sure." And he really didn't want me to do it for 80. He just was testing me. Well, I was nervous. I figured whatever he told me, if he told me to do it for 60, I was doing it for 60. But he explained to me that, I worked on that number. I came up with $85,000. I got to fight for that number. Don't be just rolling over, because people will cherry pick me to death on, taking advantage of that, and I'll be competing against myself. And if I just give up my number that easily without getting something in return, I'm making a mistake. That was a great lesson. And my dad's peers, they helped me with lessons like that most of my career.
What is your most important relationship? Maybe talk about why that is, and if that's always been the case, if that's changed over the course of your life.
Give me a context now.
Well, I mean, you've talked about your father and your grandfather, your daughter, I'm sure your spouse, your coworkers, just the role that important relationships have in forming you as a person, whether that's now or in the past, your development. Just talk about some of your important relationships, personal relationships.
So I didn't consciously set out to be a guy that thrives with building relationships. It kind of happened slowly. I was actually a little gun shy. I've been a longtime volunteer firefighter, and 40 years ago they made me the recording secretary of the fire department, and I had to get up in front of like 25 of my buddies who had been drinking beer, and I had to read a one-page report, and I can remember my palms being sweaty. I was really nervous, about that. I was practicing, read it 10 times beforehand. Well, after you do that for a while, you get more comfortable. And then I become, years later, president of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame, and I'm on a live TV audience with 1,000, people in attendance, and I'm just calm and cool as can be. So it was a point of pushing myself a little bit to get out there and get comfortable. And that rolls right into being comfortable with relationships. One of my mentors told me one time that you want to have dialogue with people and form the relationship with people when you don't need something from them, like a job. So it's great that I try to be buddies for the first time with somebody, but I have a $400,000 proposal in their hands, and that's really appears like really why I'm trying to be friendly with them. Get out in front of it, get the relationship established. It's way easier, and you're probably going to be way more successful in getting it because you're pals before that decision needs to be made. I consciously will go out of my way, and this started years ago, and would say hello to people. And I lead with introducing myself and telling them my name, because if they're anything like me, there's a lot of times I recognize somebody and I don't know their name. A lot of people, if I have something, I'm somewhere with my wife, and I'll say, this is my wife Betsy, in hopes that I get the name out of them because I can't remember their name and I don't want to, call them the wrong name. So, I've aggressively built up a foundation of friends and business relationships over the years to the point that, people joke about, I know everybody in town, and I do know a lot of people in town, but I purposefully set out to do that, to have relationships, to have acquaintances that I'm comfortable with, and I feel like if I ever have to pick up the phone and ask them for something, I've already established the baseline for why I would be comfortable doing that.
I know one of those friendships you have in Buffalo is Jim Kelly, and I think most people know about the struggles he's been through with illness and I guess cancer, throat cancer. Do you think there's anything that you've learned from your relationship with Jim and the things that he's been through, that perseverance?
Well, perseverance is the key word. A lesser person would have crumbled. What he went through from a physical standpoint, from a pain standpoint, how he fought through it. Even when he was down, he was positive. He had that positive, I'm going to beat this attitude. And oh my gosh, he has. I still see him at most of the home Buffalo Bills games, and he's still got a smile. He sits out in the crowd with the regular fans. He He's just one of the guys. He could be in the owner's private box or suite if he wanted to be, but he wants to be out there in the crowd. And yeah, he's inspiring to say the least. And if you take that fight, you take that grit and that attitude when you have a challenge in front of you, it almost seems a lot easier than if he could do it in the way he did. Well, you ought to be able to do it too. You got to fight through.
You mentioned that you've been a volunteer firefighter for a long time. What made you want to be a volunteer firefighter, or feel like you should?
Well, I joined when I was 21 or 22 years old, and I did it because I thought I might learn something to help me on the fire sprinkler business side. I thought there's something to be learned there. And there was, but what ended up happening was it was more about what I could educate the fire department about. And in our town, there's a half a dozen plus different departments, and getting to know the leadership in those departments and going and running sprinkler drills and training with them, it just became something that I was passionate about. Firemen used to carry little wood wedges in their pocket. Well, try stopping a sprinkler head, your turnout gear, as soon as you lift your hands up like this, the water starts filling down the cuffs here. It's not easy to do that. So, I trained with them and showed them proper technique. And coincidentally, when they were ready to build a new fire hall, or it was time to sprinkle their fire hall, I ended up negotiating all the jobs with them, going back to that trust.
It sounds like from a lot of what we've talked about that you feel a certain, maybe even a strong sense of duty to give back, to contribute for what you've gotten from the industry. Would you say that's true?
I would say that's true.
Maybe talk a little bit about how you developed that sense of duty to give back, and maybe when that started to happen in your life.
So I can't remember exactly when I can consciously say that, I made a decision to give back, but I think in probably some small way, shape, or form, I did it from the onset in little ways, that was based on my position. I've never been one that really needs or seeks out credit or a pat on the back. If it comes, it comes, and that's great, and that makes me feel good. But if I don't get it and I still feel like I made a difference for somebody, that's a good feeling too. As I've furthered my career, there's more opportunity. I know a little bit about basically everything in the business, so it's not like people can just come to me and want to know about how to, do an estimate, or I'll review an estimate for them. I can talk to them about production. I can talk to them about finances. I can talk to them about design and the field and fabrication and purchasing. So I'm well-rounded, and that has given me more opportunities to touch more people.
Obviously, your work with NFSA, I'm sure, is a huge part of that. What do you? I think a lot of people can track pretty easily what you've given to NFSA, but what do you think NFSA has given to you? We
were NFSA members years ago, and I never really got involved on the national level. It was the local level. We just seemed to be in a spot where we didn't get much attention, and I wasn't feeling the love. And then 30 plus years ago, John Viniello came to our office, and we sat down and we talked about, how that needed to change. And he made a commitment for more involvement. It also opened up my eyes to the opportunities and, the education that was available on the national level. My first real involvement came when I was given an opportunity to sit on the negotiating committee for Buffalo Local 703 at that point in time, and that turned into Local 669 eventually when they were absorbed, and I became part of the National 669 Committee. And I'm the longest standing member of that committee right now, and that introduced me to a wave of other leaders from other companies that mostly we don't compete against each other because we're from different regions. And nobody's afraid to share their successes and share their failures, what's working, what product is knocking it out of the park for them, what product they're having issues with. It opened up the fact about the work that NFSA does for codes, which a lot of people can't appreciate unless you're really, focused and paying attention and want to learn the mission of NFSA and what we're driving and striving for. There's so much good going on, and that was contagious for me. The more that I learned and I saw, how they were pursuing, excellence in our business and trying to model it so every building is sprinklered, you want to be part of that team, if you will, and it is a team, and it's a great team. So I've really enjoyed the camaraderie, getting to meet more people on a national scale, and feel like I contribute to the success of the organization.
Let's get back to some more general topics here. I got us off base a little bit. Who's your best friend? And how did you become best friends?
I have about 10 best friends.
Pick one.
All right, I'll talk about
maybe your oldest friend.
Talk about my oldest friend. Yeah, grew up 2 doors from me. His name is Jim Troutman. His brother Tom worked for us. Brother Tom was a 6'9" fitter, and Jim and I had a love for sports. Like we had a great street, and we played in the same baseball team, Little League baseball team. His dad was the coach. My dad was the assistant coach. Graduated high school. He was my first roommate when we got an apartment out of high school. Still communicate with him on a weekly basis. We don't see each other as much as we'd like to. We're only 10 or 15 minutes away, but with social media now, we can text each other, and we still love each other as lifelong buddies. So I met him on my 6th birthday. So.
Pretty cool. I really admire the culture of API. I think anybody that knows much about the API group would agree. How do you think you've changed as a leader since Davis Ulmer entered the fold of the API group? Or what have you learned? How have you developed as a person? Just talk about some of your experiences and how you've developed from since you've joined API group.
So there aren't many leaders that would sell their business and 17 years later still be working for the company that acquired you. But I can't imagine my life now without API and what they've taught me. Our mission is building great leaders, and that everyone is a leader. And they practice that and preach that relentlessly from the top down. I would have never sent my employees at the expense that it is to get a week's full leadership training. But it doesn't teach you to put pipe in faster or to draw a system faster. But it teaches how to get everybody rowing in the same direction, to get your team aligned, get your team disciplined, make good decisions, be honest. Be supportive when somebody has an issue or makes a mistake. Don't destroy them. There are so many good things that came out of there. That financial training that I missed at Davis Ulmer, well, there was no missing it at API. They weren't spoon feeding it to me. I was getting a crash course from the first time they told me to do a budget, and how do you do one of those? We never did a budget, but that whole financial piece and watching and monitoring our jobs has been so crucial. The ability to meet with senior leaders and learn more efficient and better ways to do things and to manage people and support the team. it's been critical. And that experience is really the driving force behind me still wanting to work and motivating me to give back. Be humble. I think that's a special trait for a great leader, is to be humble. You can't say I a lot. It can't be about you. If you know somebody, well, I did this, I did that, I did this, I did that. Seems like they're more concerned with themselves than with the team. So if you ever catch me saying I.
I can't remember you saying that one time.
And by the way, I'm way more comfortable getting questioned by an attorney in this setting. Usually it's uncomfortable when an attorney is asking me questions. So.
You sort of touched on this tangentially, but I imagine that you've had many mentees over the course of your career. Maybe talk about some of those relationships, what it means to you to be a mentor, some of the advice you've given your mentees.
Yeah, great question. So the most recent example, one that stands out in my head and I like to talk about is when we'll have a new team member come to the negotiating committee and they don't understand the process. And the process isn't a comfortable one a lot of the times. It's kind of dragged out. You feel like you're beating the head against the wall. And they come in with guns a-blazing, and I have to temper their enthusiasm and tell them it's a process, and just because we're talking 3 months before the expiration of the contract doesn't mean that we're getting that contract done that afternoon. I see them after their first round through it, they get some exposure. The second time through, they can contribute a little more. It's almost deer in the headlights when you go through it the first time. You can't believe that this is what you have to do. So I've enjoyed that, helping new teammates on the negotiating team come through. I will go to branch offices. If they have a new manager, I'll go to Milwaukee, for example. And I sat with a leader who was a field leader and came into the office. And I spent a week with the kid and I just shadowed him and we just talked and I gave him suggestions and ideas. I'm not a guy that wants to tell somebody how to do it. I want to give them some options and I want to let them make the decision on how to do it. And once in a while, you have to make a mistake to learn. I just don't want it to be a catastrophic mistake. Let's not have the first job you bid be $1 million job. Like, let's start off with some little ones. And, if you're going to lose money on a $10,000 job, it's probably going to be a lot less than losing money on a $500,000 job. So.
And Josh Liegler's doing a great job.
He is doing a great job.
One of the things that you touched on there is patience. What role do you think that plays in success, and maybe talk about some of the ways that you had to learn that?
I think that I've always just inherited, I think it was my mom's ability to be patient, and if you fly as much as I do, you get your patience tested in airports and with plane schedules a lot. It's been important for me when I see the development of someone. Like, my dad was patient developing me. He didn't expect that I was going to know how to estimate a job my first week on the job. He gave me the background and he brought me along, kind of like you'll see a pro athlete, like a rookie, come on a professional team. They give them a couple carries in a game and maybe they give them 5 plays and they kind of ease them into the role till they get some confidence. And once they get the confidence, you can start letting them loose. And well, then they fumble. And you bring them in, you talk to them. You got to protect the ball better. You got to do this. It's basically the same fundamentals. You just have to be patient. Make sure that they're ready to go the next step before you put them in harm's way.
Do you think that? I think the answer is probably that there's a combination, but do you think that leaders are born leaders, or do you think you can make someone a leader?
I think that many people are born with leadership skills. You can see it right in the playground, early on in life where, there's some people that kind of take charge, and not all those people end up growing up to be successful leaders. Some of them get derailed. Others, if they are passionate about, their learning and their growth and development, I think you can build a leader. I think that's part of what my role is today. What I help do is give people the confidence to make decisions and enhance their leadership skills. And sometimes when they're hesitating, give them the push to make the decision and live with the results. Again, because it's not going to be a catastrophic. We're all going to miss. You can't make the right decisions all the time. But, I believe in my gut, what my gut tells me, and I trust it. And, if I'm right 80% of the time, but I can't pull the trigger because I'm worried about being wrong, well, you're not going to get anything done. You gotta go for it sometimes. But again, protect the mothership. Don't do something that's going to risk grave harm. And a lot of times that involves taking a job that you don't have the ability to handle. Either you're too busy, you rationalize why you can take it for a lower number. Don't do that. Don't do that. Stick to your training. Stick to what your gut tells you.
We've talked about a lot of traits that are important in being successful and being a good leader. If you could only pick one leadership superpower to impart to someone, one trait that you can just get them to level 100, what one of those traits would you pick?
I pick honesty. I remember one of the first conversations when Davis Ulmer was being acquired by API. Russ Becker said to me he goes, "Be honest with me." He goes, "I'm going to find out eventually. I always find out. Just be honest. I'm prepared that it's not always going to be good news. Don't sugarcoat it. Just tell me like it is. I'll handle that." And, it got tested, a few times when a job was going south, or, we had a serious injury, on a job or something like that, or, something didn't look right. But he's been a man of his word. I've shot straight with him, and sometimes I joke about the fact that I got to get it out. I got to call him. I don't want to be carrying it around for the weekend. I gotta dump him on it on a Friday night, because I don't want him to find out over the weekend and say, "Well, why didn't I hear it from Steve first?"
Sure. Let's say that I just graduated from college, and I came to you and I said, "Steve, my goal in life is to be you one day." What advice would you give me?
Get in the shop. Yeah, I'd want you to start from the bottom up. I just believe that the skill set that I was able to develop by taking it slow and learning the different disciplines of the job were important. Understanding the terminology. If I asked you, what a 221 was, you might not know what that is, but you would if you spent some time in the shop. You'd learn how to look at a piece of 1.5 inches and know it was 1.5 inches. You'd know that we're measuring inside diameters, not outside diameters. You'd know what a thread and a groove is. You'd know, all the language, and then you take the next step, and that foundation, it keeps compounding till you start feeling comfortable in the business, and then you better work a lot.
Do you have any heroes?
That's a big word for me. When I was a kid, I was a John F. Kennedy fan. He he was assassinated when I was in 3rd grade, and that was impactful on me. Coming home and seeing my mom sitting in front of the TV crying. I'd never seen my mom cry before. And, I still obviously, to this day, remember that. I have a lot of sports heroes. Born and bred a Buffalo guy, got a lot of Buffalo sports heroes. And, yeah.
What was the best day of your life?
Probably when my daughter was born. Yeah. Got a lot of great memories. I was a guy that was told by my friends that they grow up fast, and I paid attention to that. And I attended and coached her. I attended her practices. I did, everything I could. And you know what? They grow up fast. And now she's blessed me with a couple granddaughters. And, I can't wait. If I'm out of town for 3 or 4 days, I hit the airport. If they're still awake, I'm swinging by the house on the way home and, saying hello and spending a few minutes with her. So the joy that she's brought my wife and I is pretty special.
Not just blowing smoke, it's incredible to me that you were able to be, that involved and be the coach and, be so active in your daughter's life while running this business. And, I just wonder what you would say to someone who's, maybe running one of your branches and is very busy about how important family is in making that time.
It goes by too fast. I was talking to one of the agents here about, one of our businesses that we transitioned, and on January 1, it will be 7 years. And we were both like, how could 7 years go by so fast? Well, 7 years is like 5th grade to senior in high school, or, birth to 2nd or 3rd grade, whatever it is. And, you'll find a certain level with what you can do during the day. Like when I think about the time I invested, the road trips with her travel team in the summer, gone every weekend. She was 12 years old. She played 92 softball games between high school and she played basketball and she played field hockey and, she played tennis and golf and stuff like that. And it was like, I couldn't fit that stuff in my schedule now. My schedule has transitioned to other things that are important at this point in time, but don't miss the opportunity to spend it with your kids when they're growing up. It's helped me have an amazing relationship with her and her husband and the girls.
What do you think is the most important thing that you've learned from being a father? Or how has it changed you in an important way?
I was blessed with having a good kid. She just followed the rules. She was athletic. She was smart. She was independent. She was a good kid. And I'd like to think that her mother and I and the parenting had something to do with that. But I know sometimes there's a little luck involved too. You just get one with a personality. I know other friends that are amazing parents and have some hellions there. So just spend the time, give them the love. Don't let them get away with too much, but let them get away with a little bit. Let them be a kid.
You mentioned luck, and I'm glad you brought that up. Do you think, what role do you think luck's played in life? You mentioned being lucky as a father. I mean, do you think that you could be where you are today without a little luck?
I think luck is important. But luck is a product of the energy and the effort you put in. I think you're luckier. It just doesn't fall out of the sky. If you're not doing anything, you're probably not going to get lucky. But hard work and effort and determination will get you lucky once in a while.
Pretty much guarantee you that's true.
Yeah.
Let me see. Do you think there's a difference between happiness and satisfaction? And the second part to that question is, what is the relationship between success and either happiness or satisfaction for you?
Happiness to me is maybe a little more superficial. Happiness, we like to feel happy, right? Happy is short-lived. Where satisfaction, I think, is more foundational. It's more when you're satisfied, it lasts longer. You remember it more.
What feeling does a big win give you? Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Nick Saban, you're probably shocked that I'm bringing up Nick Saban, but Nick Saban said that he's to a point in his career where he's more hurt by the loss than satisfied by a win, and he's really more relieved by a win than satisfied. So what feeling does a big win give you?
A big win gives me happiness, but the satisfaction would be winning it all. I haven't got there yet. So.
What does winning it all look like to you?
I can't allow myself to look at that yet.
Yeah.
I'll tell you when I get there.
Makes sense.